I just had like tonal whiplash from this. Hi guys, Kichu64 here, and today we're talking about the Orville New Horizons episode 2 titled Shadow Realm. And before we jump into the review, I just want to tell you guys how thankful I am for everybody who checked out my last review, my episode 1 review. That was my first ever Orville video, and I had a very good positive reaction, and I love seeing so many Orville fans in the comments. I wasn't sure how fans would react to the first episode of this season because it dealt with a lot of heavy subject matter. There was basically no humor in the entire episode, and it really set forth a tone for what I think they were going for in this season. And in episode 2, you see some of the humor come back, and that was something I stated in episode 1, that part of the reason you didn't have the humor in that was because of the tone setting and the fact that that episode, the subject matter, didn't really lend itself to humorous moments at all. So here in episode 2, you can see a little bit of humor coming back, and I really loved episode 2. So I hope all of you guys did too. I'm going to go ahead and share my thoughts. Let's just go ahead and jump into it. So we open up the episode and we find out the Orville's going to go pick up a Vice Admiral Christie in order to negotiate passage into unexplored space in Krill space. So we get Krill coming back. So I always like the Krill. And while they're having this discussion in the conference room, Claire kind of zones out. And when I was watching it, I was like, well, this is either she knows who this Admiral person is, or she has some kind of past experience with this area of space they're talking about. Well, it turns out to be she knows the Admiral. It's revealed pretty early in the episode that Dr. Finn had a relationship, was married at one point to Admiral Christie, which sets up a relationship which kind of builds up in the first part of this episode. So I find out that Claire actually married the Admiral when she was right out of college. It didn't last all that long. And she looks back at that time, and she said something I thought was pretty poignant, which was, "It's like I'm watching someone else's daughter. I'm sad for her, but I know she has to learn her own lessons." And, that's kind of reflective how a lot of us look back on past mistakes and past moments in our lives. It's easy to look back at it with the luxury of hindsight and say these were poor decisions. But, in the moment, all you can do is make the best decisions you can make. And hopefully things work out, and sometimes they don't. And when you look back at it, just know, hey, you have information that your past self didn't. So I just thought that line was pretty interesting and nice. So after the negotiations, the Krill do agree to let the Orville move through their space, but there's 4 caveats, one of which was mining rights. They specifically mention a planet that they want to mine, and I'm thinking that this might come into play later in the season. I don't know. By the way, I have zero information of anything that they're doing here. I don't have any inside information or nothing. But I feel like this might come into play later in the season. It has that potential. I feel like this could be a breadcrumb leading to something that they're going to do. And honestly, that's all, a compliment to the writing team, because I actually have faith in the writing team for the Orville, which is something I can't say about most of the shows I watch nowadays, especially in all of my favorite franchises. Like, I actually have faith that these writers might actually take something like this and do something with it. So it's a compliment to the writing team. The other caveat that the Krill put out is that only one ship at a time can come through this area of space, and they lay out a path that they're allowed to go to get to the area of space, and they can't deviate from it at all. And then the other caveat is that the Krill are going to put a tracking beacon on the Orville in order to track them the entire time, make sure they don't deviate from the course they laid out. A lot of strides in relations to the Krill, but as you can see from this, it's not like they blindly trust them or anything. They just have a mutual enemy in the Kaylon. So then the Krill learn that the Orville is interested in checking out the Kylar expanse, and it's a domain of evil filled with demons. That's what the Krill say about that area of space, about the expanse. And their religious texts, as we know from the Krill, they're very religious. And their text speaks of shadow realms where demons lay in wait to possess souls. So, yeah, not a very good place to visit. Anyway, the Orville decides that they're just going to go explore the expanse for themselves, despite the warnings from the Krill, because they're explorers after all. They need to explore for themselves. They don't put a whole lot of stock in the Krill's religious text. And I'm sure nothing's going to go wrong there, right? They actually do have a little discussion with Admiral Halsey on if the Orville should investigate this expanse. and they kind of discuss the Krill warning to some extent. And you know, Admiral Christie's the one who kind of pushes the argument over the edge, and saying, hey, we're gonna go check this out. We're explorers. We're gonna go check this out. Again, I don't think anything's gonna go wrong from this, is there? You know what? The Krill always reminded me of the Romulans in their level of arrogance. They're kind of like Romulans mixed with like pre-Cardassian occupation Bajorans, because like the Bajorans pre-Cardassian occupations were they actually operated on a caste system. So anyway, yeah, it kind of reminded me, every time when they show the Krill, it kind of reminds me of the Romulans. What was surprising to me was the fact that Admiral Christie decides that he's going to stick around on the Orville and go in this exploratory mission, which never really happens. Admirals sticking around for that for exploratory missions, usually you don't see that very often. And apparently Captain Mercer doesn't have a problem with that. Usually captains have problems when admirals want to tag along on these types of missions, because admirals have the tendency to take over and not let the captain be the captain. But you know, that doesn't really happen in this episode. I thought that that's one of the things that was going to come into play, but it doesn't really. And part of the reason Admiral Christie wants to stick around is because he wants to talk more with Claire, you know, build that relationship again. So Admiral Christie actually goes to Isaac to talk about Claire, because he knows that, you know, Isaac and Claire had a relationship, so he wants to find some information on Claire, see what she's like now, and what's most important to her. And Isaac, of course, you know, says, yeah, this is all the things, this is all the data I have on Claire. Of course, he goes too far in his description with some things, and that's kind of the understated humor. That's the kind of understated humor that I think that works well with the Orville. Now, you do need that kind of humor in order to you know, make it the Orville, right? But it's way different than what you saw in season 1 of the Orville, which was like, you know, slapstick, you know, like Family Guy type of humor, which I was not really a fan of. I definitely prefer the more understated humor we're getting in this episode. And speaking of humor, there's this exchange that Malloy has on the bridge. So they're looking at this sector of space, and it's very colorful. Like, it looks like crazy wallpaper for your computer of this like very colorful galaxy. And Malloy says that it reminds him of Vegas, and Isaac confirms there's no sign of intelligent life in the system. And Malloy says, wow, it really is Vegas. No offense to anybody who lives in Vegas, right? I actually know some people who live in Vegas, and yeah, they're smart people, but I just thought this was kind of funny. And this is the kind of humor that I think works. So as I said before, the Orville is the first Union ship to be in this sector of space, and they pick up a distress signal coming from that expanse, you know, the expanse that the Krill warned them about, the one that they said that if they had the opportunity, they're going to go check it out. I'm sure nothing's going to go wrong. And real quick, I want to kind of compare Strange New Worlds to Orville with this specific point. This isn't something I'm going to do very often because I actually do like Strange New Worlds so far, which is the best series of New Trek in my opinion. But I'm comparing these two things for a very specific reason. So Malloy, whenever they're about to enter the expanse, says entering the haunted house, right? And there's a line in episode 4 of Strange New Worlds after she's given, Ortegas is given the order to go into a gas giant. She says, full impulse into a giant gas cloud of death. Why not? You know, one of these this works in Orville because it's the Orville. It doesn't work in Star Trek. This is kind of something I said before my last Strange New Worlds review. Strange New Worlds kind of feels like it's trying to be the Orville. So the Orville was initially a parody of Star Trek because Star Trek wasn't, and then just became more like Star Trek, while Star Trek had New Trek, which was not Star Trek, and now Star Trek's back to trying to be Star Trek, but actually an Orville version of Star Trek. So it's like Strange New Worlds is kind of like a shadow of the Orville, while the Orville was started out as a parody of Star Trek. It's all very confusing, but I'm sure you guys out there kind of get what I'm saying. Like one of these things works in the Orville and it doesn't necessarily work in Star Trek. So the distress signal brings them to like this giant biomechanical, like, kind of scarab squid looking space station, and it's glowing red. You can clearly tell this thing is evil, but like, yeah, we're gonna go check it out. Although it's funny though, if you actually rotate the colors, if you make it not red, like if you made it blue or something, I'm sure it'd look far less menacing. It's just crazy how we automatically associate like this glowing red energy with like something negative. So Orville decides they're going to send over a team to investigate. So they send over Captain Mercer, Kelly, Kiali, Lamar, Claire, and the Admiral wants to tag along. And it's at this point that I started getting red shirt vibes, you know. We all know what the red shirt vibes means. Red shirt vibes means you're the extra who's going to go down to the planet and, you know, be killed most likely. Or if in the case of TNG, it wasn't red shirts, it was the yellow shirts. Or in the case of the Orville, in this specific episode, purple shirts for the Admiral. So they're walking around the space station. That's a pretty cool set, I think, and it's empty. They don't see any signs of life or anything. There are some energy pods on the wall, and when Admiral Christie gets close to one, it opens up. And, you know, it doesn't spit out anything that we can visually see, and nothing really happens, but we all know as the audience, something definitely just happened. So they go back to the Orville. They want to break down some of the data they collected from the space station, and they discuss that, you know, even though their scanners didn't detect any signs of life on the station, that doesn't necessarily mean there isn't life on the station. It just means their scanners can't detect whatever life form it is, you know, which is obvious. And the scanners can only detect what they're programmed to, you know, to detect. So there's other forms of life out there, and there's plenty of life forms that can, you know, hide their signatures and stuff like that. So it was a very good conversation to have. But as they're having this conversation, the Admiral collapses and starts mutating into something, like half his face starts mutating. So they go back to the space station to check out the pod that sprayed the Admiral, and the distress signal that they detected and that they tracked down last time we were over there is now acting as a homing beacon, and is signaling the location of the space station, apparently calling out to something or someone. We see the Admiral continuing to mutate in sickbay, and massive props to the props department, right? Massive props to the creature effects here, because they did a really great job. Like the makeup effects for his face that's being mutated is top notch. I thought it was really good, you know, because practical creature effects are becoming a lost art in Hollywood. So I really like this. So the Admiral's scared, and he's talking to Claire, and he has to put on his old wedding ring, which they mentioned earlier in the episode as well. And this actually does come into play later in the episode because it's made out of some specific rare mineral. So it all plays together. Of course, shortly after this, the Admiral escapes. I say escapes because it wasn't like he was being tied down or held down or anything, which seems like something you might want to do just so he doesn't hurt himself since he's mutating. But he escapes, and he ends up using his command codes to shut the Orville down. And then we move into the horror aspect of the episode. So Claire goes back to her quarters to check on her boys to make sure that they're good, but the boys are off wandering around trying to find Claire, even though Claire told them in case of emergency, stay in the quarters. But of course, you know, you would think that Ty would be the one to go wandering off, the younger brother. But no, the older brother Marcus is dumb, and he doesn't want to stare out at a dark space. He's bored, so he wants to go wander around this dark ship. I feel like they could have came with a little bit of a better explanation as to why the boys ended up, leaving the quarters and wandering around looking for Claire. But oh well. So Isaac and Lamar go off to restore power by checking each of the engineering conduits, which according to Bortus, there's 132 that they got to search through. But Lamar's like, well, I'm going to check it the old-fashioned way and just go to each one. So Admiral Christie is now completely mutated into this alien ant thing. He's a parasitic alien ant-man. So I'm just going to call him Admiral Ant. Admiral Ant from now on. So when I say Admiral Ant, it's Admiral Christie as this ant life creature. He's creeping around the walls, like an ant or a spider or something like that. And it's sufficiently creepy, especially in the dark, and it's hunting Marcus and Ty. But then a lieutenant shows up and is like, I didn't see anything. Let's go ahead and get you out of here. And then, Admiral Ant jumps on him and spits acid into his face or some kind of chemical. And he starts mutating into another alien ant parasitic thing. And the body horror is real in this part. The way that they mix some practical effects with CGI effects to show his body mutating was very creepy. The body horror is real in this episode. Again, massive props to the creature effects here. I thought that this episode had great creature effects with these aliens mutating. So Captain Mercer ends up putting together, what we as the audience already knew and what he should have already knew earlier, which is the fact that the Krill warning about demonic possession is in reference to these aliens because they are taking over people. Because the doctor says the alien life form is like a parasite hijacking the body to procreate. And that the homing beacon on the space station could be summoning more of them to show up. So yeah, this obviously, depending on interpretation, could be viewed as some form of demonic possession. So that's why they probably should have taken the Krill's warning a little bit more seriously. There's a really good chase sequence where Lamar escapes from the creatures in a really well executed, intense scene, and he ends up locking himself in the brig to get away from them so that they can't get to him. And there's a shot where a couple of them are consistently keep busting into the force field, and it kind of looks like, you know, bugs running into a zapper or something. It worked very well visually. So Kiali shows up and sees Lamar in the brig and ends up luring the alien ants away from him, and she ends up luring him to a cargo bay where she fights those two plus a couple more, probably about 5 or 6, and a pretty well done fight scene, I think. But the whole time I was like, you are the security officer, where's your firearm? Like, you know, intruders are on the ship at this point, and you're the lead security officer. I know that you're, like, you know, superhuman with strength and stuff, but you also know that these things can turn you into one of them. Why do you not have a firearm? That was the whole time I was thinking. I was like, if you had a firearm, you could still have this awesome fight scene where, you know, all you have to do is have one of them knock the, you know, weapon out of her hand or something. But, you know, I don't know. It just kind of bothered me, the fact that she didn't have a firearm on her the whole time. And this is the first time we're seeing, like, multiples of these alien ant creatures. Like, there's 5 or 6 of them, as I said, she ends up fighting and taking down. And these are not just random intruders. Like, these are alien ant things. These were part of your crew. So at this point, we're seeing that a big portion of the crew is being turned into these things. There's a really cool scene where one of the alien things is coming around the corner and runs into Isaac. You know, and Isaac is completely unfazed by this. They're literally standing face to face, and this alien ant thing screaming in his face, and he just is completely unfazed by it. He just doesn't even, he's like, yeah, whatever, okay. And, you know, the alien ant thing takes off. And looking back on it, I'm kind of wondering if this specific alien ant thing was actual Admiral Ant who is remembering his conversation with Isaac. That could be the case. I don't think they tell you in the episode. I just now thought about that. But I just thought that scene was pretty cool. So Lamar finally does get communications back up by diverting some of the life support power to communications, because communications have been done on the ship this entire time. And Kiali ends up bringing one of the alien ant things that she took out to the doctor so she can investigate the best way to get rid of these things. What she discovers is that because of the transformation, the white cell count is extremely low, which means they're very susceptible to, you know, pathogens and stuff like that. And she says that if she just created something around the level of the common cold and dispersed it throughout the ship, that would be enough to kill all of the alien ant things. And there's a really great humorous line in here that, again, I don't think that this undercuts the tension at all, but Bortus asks, you know, what's going to happen to the crew, and Claire says, well, the crew might get the sniffles, and Bortus says, I am prepared. I think that's a really good lesson to writers out there, is you can have humor in specific things without reducing the tension. There is a discussion with the bridge crew about the morality of killing these alien ant things, in the sense that all these alien ant things on the ship were literally just crew members, you know, hours ago. Or you know, not that long ago. So, and they don't know how much of the crew's minds might still be in these alien ant things. So there's a morality question as to, you know, if killing them is the right thing to do. Malloy's like, well, it's an us versus them type of situation, because they're just going to keep taking us over, so we got to do something. So Claire ends up suggesting maybe there's a way that she can, you know, talk to the Admiral Ant. If she can track down Admiral Ant, then maybe she can threaten them and convince them to leave. And that's where that wedding ring comes back into play, because it has, you know, it's made out of some specific alloy. They're able to scan for it and find it. Although with all of their power systems down, it does bring into question how they were able to scan for it, since they had just brought up communications. But, you know, regardless of that little hiccup in the way some of the technology might function whenever they don't have, you know, are on reduced power. The idea of it's like, okay, that works. And finally, we get a security team with guns as they escort Claire to go meet with Admiral Ant and have this discussion. And from this discussion, you can tell that Admiral Christie's gone. There's only Admiral Ant. There was only Zool. And these things seem to operate on some kind of hive mind. So they're like biomechanical ant Borg. They're like Borg, but biomechanical ants. And after the threat of being killed, the alien ant things do end up leaving. So Admiral Ant ends up calling out to all the other alien ants to, retreat and go back to their ship, because their ship is right outside at this point, the ship that the homing beacon had called. And when it cuts to different parts of the ship, you see how many of these ant things there are. And that's a lot of the crew. There's quite a big portion of the crew that's been turned into these things and is now leaving. And they don't address it. And I'll get into that here in a second. But first, I want to say that the worst part of this episode is the last part of this episode, because the ant things leave and we immediately cut from that very dark, tense scene and the realization that many of the crew, 30 plus, whoever knows how, didn't actually count them, but it's not out of the realm that 30 crew members have been taken by these alien ant things. And we go from that dark, tense moment directly into Claire's at a lounge and there's music playing and she's eating. And I just had tonal whiplash from this. And it happened. There's only 3 minutes left in the episode at this point. And so Isaac comes up and gives his condolences for the loss of Admiral Christie. And, basically Isaac and Claire kind of reconnect a little bit. And that's kind of what you get out of this episode. You get them reconnecting and you get the introduction of this new alien ant Borg, species, which is a cool species that is a potential threat that we might see again later in the season. But really, those are the two main things you take away from this episode. But I hated the way that this wrapped up very quickly, very fast, and I had massive tonal whiplash from the way that it swapped from that tense scene to Claire at the restaurant. I didn't like it at all. And they don't address the fact that they've lost a 30 crew member. How do you not address the fact that you lost 5 or 10% of your crew? They did such a good job, setting up for everything that was going to happen in the episode, and to see how they dropped the ball in the last bit of this episode was really disappointing, because I really liked this episode. I think overall, I like this episode better than episode 1. This is definitely one of my favorite Orville episodes. But I really didn't like the way that it ended. It just was very abrupt. And I said before, the fact that they have the extended runtime on Hulu means that you shouldn't have this kind of problem. You shouldn't have problems where you have to have abrupt endings. You have the excuse more so when it's on TV, when you're restricted to a strict 48, 49 minute runtime. And, on Hulu, we had an hour and 9 minutes for this episode. I think there was an hour and 20 minutes for that first episode. So when you have no cap on the length of episode, there's really not a good excuse for why this should end so quick. But I do think the creature effects were amazing. Like I said, I thought that the props department deserves props. Really awesome. The horror aspects work really well. The build up and the pacing for the episode, it's very intriguing. The new alien species they introduced is very intriguing. This episode reminded me a lot of the TNG episode Genesis, which was all about the crew devolving. As a matter of fact, Barclay turns into a fly creature or something like that in that episode, which is kind of reminiscent of how the Admiral changing into the alien ant, Admiral Ant. And that TNG episode Genesis always creeped me out when I was a kid watching it. That was definitely the creepiest TNG episode. And I feel like this is easily the creepiest Orville episode. It's not even a close competition for the Orville. This is a creepy, well done, alien, or horror aspect. I felt like it was done really well. But there is one aspect that I do think kind of falls short, and that's the fact that, there's all these personnel all over the ship, but once the power goes out, the personnel from the ship just disappear. Every time we see our characters, they're always by themselves or they're with one other main character or whatever. But you don't see any of the random crew members wandering around in the dark. They all just disappear. Every time there's a corridor, it's completely empty, and it only makes it feel like the Orville, all of a sudden, when the power went out, the Orville just started operating on a skeleton crew or something. And so it kind of took me out of what was happening because, again, there's other people on the ship, and just all of a sudden they all just randomly, disappear. And, it's kind of how at the ending, when they cut back to Claire in the lounge and she's eating, you see all of these people well dressed in the lounge and eating and having a good time, when literally 20 seconds earlier in the episode, you still had the alien things on the ship and, taking crew members. And it just, like I said, it's tonal whiplash. It takes you out of it when you don't see other crew members around. So I think that was another missed opportunity. And as I said, the fact that, none of our characters ever have weapons on them until like the last 5 minutes of the episode. Then all of a sudden they've all got weapons on them. When they know that there's intruders on board and they know that they're under attack of some sort, but nobody ever has any weapons on them. I get it's for the sense of building the horror aspect, but you can, have some of the characters have firearms on them and still create suspenseful moments with it. So there were a couple things I didn't like in the episode. As I said, the good far outweighs the bad here. I really enjoyed this episode, don't get me wrong, but these are problems I think that it has. Overall, I like this episode better than episode 1. I feel like they introduced a new deadly adversary pretty well, and it had really suspenseful scenes. So, as they continue to build up the Orville universe, I think they did that successfully here. But what do you guys think? Did you have the same issue I did with the ending? I feel like that's the weakest part of this episode, like not even close, because the rest of the episode I think was really good. Just, I don't know what happened there at the end. I feel like they dropped the ball. But what do you guys think? Did you like this episode more than episode 1? I'm really looking forward to talking about episode 3. And just thank you to everyone who checked out this video. Welcome new subscribers from the Orville and Star Trek stuff. Thank you so much for subscribing. You guys are awesome. And thank you to everyone else who checked out this video. And if you like this video, please like, comment, share, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff, or don't. I'm not a beggar. I'm D-True64, and I'll always tell you the truth.